I'm Susie Miller, alternative divorce guide, divorce strategist, and I've just read a book called Our Happy Divorce, which I have to say, and I'm sitting here interviewing now Ben and Nikki, who are not just the writers of this book, but they are inside it. It's all about their story about their divorce. And when I was first sent this, I have to admit, I just thought, come on, how can this be? Even though I spend most of my time encouraging people to have better ways to divorce. But I was blown away by it, actually. It was a lovely read. It's a really easy read. And I love the way you draw in the different perspectives of all the different characters in what's become this amazing extended family. I also really love the honesty and the compassion that you have for each other throughout it. So I wanted to start talking about faking it till you make it. So my question really is what for you, right at the beginning, it is difficult to get on well. I know from personal experience, there's a time where you really don't want to even be near that person, but they're the other parent. So you've got to try, but you don't want to do it in a begrudging way because the kids can tell, can't they? And you have a son, a very special son. Tell us a little bit about your son.
Well, that's what I always say. This whole process is all about him. Everything that we've done through these last, 13 and a half years has been about him because he was supposed to be here. This marriage isn't a failure because we have this child. So we as parents can't fail him, which I think too many people do. They fail their children just because their own marriage failed.
Right. And the idea that from the beginning, the fake it till you make it is,
you don't like each other in the beginning,
no
matter what.
Yeah. Divorces don't end because, end with a kumbaya moment, of love and compassion. It's the fruit salad of emotions and the two main buttons or triggers are the romance and finance buttons. And as you know, divorce presses both those extremely hard. So, everybody's been around a divorce family that does not get along. And it's an uncomfortable, palpable situation that makes everybody uncomfortable. So what we decided from the beginning was, let's just put on our big boy pants, right? Let's just, when Nikki comes to the game, Asher's game, with her new boyfriend, I go over, and when Asher runs over and hugs Chad, Nikki's new boyfriend at the time, husband now, I go over, and then after he's done, I give Chad a hug and smile. And meanwhile, my insides are doing somersaults, but on the outside, it's sort of like the duck on the water, right? On the outside, I probably looked like I was floating nicely smooth across the water, but underneath, my legs are kicking like crazy. And that was sort of the process of what we went through. So everybody didn't, most importantly Asher, but then everybody else around us didn't feel like walking on eggshells.
It might have felt a little strange at first.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But it actually eased people around us a bit.
Yeah.
I had an experience when I had, for a while, my children's father remarried and they lived in the same street for a while, which was great. The kids could run backwards and forwards, and I think you had a similar thing. And people thought it was weird, and they didn't do it unkindly, but I began to wonder if maybe I was a bit weird. Did you get any sense of that?
I think there's still people that think we're weird.
This is the reason why actually we decided to write the book, is because people didn't, it's so against the norm of what people think on divorce. And even when you, being in the field and being around couples, when you first read it, it's like, come on. These people are trying to get a reality show, or right. It's just so far-fetched that eventually people's like, we would just go about our normal lives of posting on social media, and people would have comments like, you guys are amazing, you're inspirational.
I think people would also say, well, if you get along so well, why aren't you married?
Yeah.
Well, there's that, right? And
it's a different kind of getting along.
Right. It's a different kind of love, right? Yeah. It's a sort of best friend love.
I think we respect each other more now than we did when we were married.
No question. And we do live on the same street. And our son is able to go down and go between houses whenever he wants. There's no, what are you doing at your mother's? It's my night. You know, why'd you stop by there?
I mean, we do try to keep a schedule for him,
right.
because I think that helps keep kids.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it's
normalized.
Good for,
Right.
But I mean, if he wants to go down there and have dinner, if he wants to come to my house and have dinner, it's totally fine.
Right. And so other people were saying these things and sort of egging us on or pushing us to write this book.
Good.
Because it is, at least in my experience, and why I sort of convinced Nikki for a long time to write it with me, because I think it's so meaningful that it comes from both of us.
Right.
That it's, you know, alternating chapters. It did take 4 years to write, because look, we don't get along 100% of the time. Our happy divorce is not a happy, you know, there would be fights, and Nikki would say, I'm not doing your effing book, and you can stick your book where the sun doesn't shine. So we wouldn't talk about the book for a month. And then, you know, it sort of evolved.
I mean, we would talk during that month,
right.
but we would talk about the book.
Because it was shoved somewhere where we didn't want to get it. But, and then we decided what important, through the process of writing it and bringing up, we realized what an important role that our spouses play in this whole deal. And we felt it to be appropriate for them to write a chapter. So when you said all the characters involved, you know, have a voice, is my wife, Nadia, and Nikki's husband, Chad, both wrote a book, because, I mean, what an important chapter in the book. What an important role they play. And what they have to do is exactly what Nikki and I had to do in the beginning, and that's put ego aside. It's not about, and so they had to buy into what we were trying to accomplish. And they've done so with grace. And the outcome has been that they've just sort of fit into our lives, each of our lives, perfectly.
I think it was very beautiful, and I love the way that your son did I think it's the final chapter, so he gets a voice as well, because by then he'd grown older. I think one of the problems is that people, like here in the UK anyway, the media often shows when they've shown a kind of happy co-parenting divorce, these people are like such good friends all the way through, and that's the problem, is because it's not like that for most people. It is
right.
What I loved about your book is very real, and it's something that people can identify with, and it was that you put your big girls and big boy pants on and just put your egos over there for a while. And how have you found that? Because I found it was probably the most difficult experiences of my life, and it certainly changed me for the better. And so I'm really glad I've been through that. I don't know who I'd be if I hadn't been through those kind of experiences. It's a great personal growth experience. Has that been something that you've been conscious of, or is it that I don't want to shine too big a light on it, like it's not, we haven't all got halos or anything, but it does change you, doesn't it? And do you think it's had that kind of impact on you guys?
100%. I think for me too, I mean, I know I was a lot younger than I am now, but I think that it made me a much better mother, and it gave me the strength that I didn't know I had inside. And I mean, I'm not telling everybody to go out and get divorced because you're going to become a better person, but you have to take what you can get and make yourself a better person from the experience you're having.
Yeah, and it's so true. And just from an outside perspective, somebody who does love this woman, and to see her grow, you know, because I'm obviously very close to her, and I've seen her. We met when she was 22 years old.
Not 22 now.
She's not 22 now. But to see what happened after the divorce, as far as, you know, she talked about a mother, but also what a better wife she is, and a better person. And not that she was a bad person, but she's just a more evolved person. And for me too, unfortunately for me, growth happens at my lowest points in my life. It always has, because I think pain is a great motivator.
Yes.
And there's nothing more painful than a divorce, because, like I said, it pushes all of your buttons. all
sometimes
the fear.
pain shuts people down.
Right.
So
You can either change or you can't. And one of the things that just a little anecdote was I had sent my mom the manuscript because my parents didn't have a good divorce. And I talk about it in the book. And it's actually one of the reasons that we decided to find a different way, because I didn't want that outcome for my child or our son. But I sent it to her. She read it. She called me, and in typical Jewish mother fashion, she said, "I'm sorry I ruined your whole life." I told her at that moment, I said, "Mom, you don't get it. Like, if you could give me a crystal ball and have me change anything about my past, especially about what happened with you and Dad, I wouldn't take you up on that offer, because life happens. Everything happens in life for a reason, and I'm not sure we would have the outcome today if I didn't have to go through what I went through with my parents, because I wouldn't have had that experience of what it felt like to be a child of a parent who don't get along."
And for me, I think I have the opposite.
Right.
That my parents, 52 years later, are still married. So I wanted to make sure Asher had as close to the experience I had growing up that he can have with two divorced parents.
Right. So it all happens for a reason.
Yeah.
And if you don't, right, you learn from your mistakes. And like I said, pain is the great motivator. And we were able to use that for good instead of for bad.
Yeah. And we're not going to suddenly become Oprah shows here, but I do want to go a little bit deeper because I was really interested in what you said, and only talk about what you feel comfortable to talk about. But you talk about the I believe it was the 12 steps program, and my personal experience was, as you said, pain is a great motivator. So for me, what at the time seemed to be the worst thing that ever happened to me became definitely not just the best thing, but it opened my eyes to many levels of understanding, shall we say. And I'm still very much on that journey, but it certainly it made me open to a greater understanding of spirituality, because I was having a bit of an argument with God at the time. It's like, how dare he do this to me, and what's the game, and what's going on? I was not happy. So we've got a much better relationship now. But I find that quite often when people go through any major journey, which starts the catalyst of pain, they will often have not necessarily a specific faith, but they'll have some kind of a philosophy or connection, shall we say, with something bigger than their ego and these bodies that we have. Something a little bit more than that, which is not to lean on, but actually is an inspiration for being the best they can possibly be. And I wondered if both of you in different ways had any of that happen to you.
Well, absolutely. I wish I could blame that I was an alcoholic and addict using that ended our marriage, but even worse, I was 13 years sober when we got divorced, but I wasn't a person who was doing the things I was supposed to be doing, and sort of turned into this, they call them dry drunks, which can cause just as much wreckage as somebody who is an alcoholic and addict who's actively using. Part of the foundation of our happy divorce is based on some of the principles of the 12 steps. And we both had to admit that it takes two to make a relationship and two to ruin a relationship. And then we had to admit I had the faith, and I think Nikki had her own faith, that it was going to be okay. That if we went through this path, unfortunately, faith doesn't have a timer on it. So it didn't, there was no, like, you're going to feel better in
5 days.
Right. Right. So it was just, I just had to stay on this path and have faith that everything was going to be good, but also have faith that on the other side was something better and more spiritually, there was more spiritual growth on the other side. And then the most important part of the whole deal was we had to clean up the wreckage of the past. And, I always say that we all have the capacity and the ability to be happy. Every human being does. But we can't do that if we live in the past. We can't live with that if we hold on to things in the past or in the future. And so we had to, get real with each other and apologize. I sat Nikki down and I apologized for my part in the marriage, ending the marriage. And she then in turn, for the first and only time, apologized to me. And I say her, but I think me too, was the first time that we've ever apologized to each other. But it was genuine and it was authentic. And then accepting each other's apology. And that was the foundation of our happy divorce. And then in turn, we could start living in the present and not, keep on saying it, it's you.
I mean, neither one of us were people that anybody would have wanted to be married to. That
no, we weren't. I mean, we were good people. Yeah. We just weren't very happy people, and it manifests itself in the marriage is just two ships passing each other in the night. There was no depth, and we're just not. When you're not happy, you can't have. If you don't love yourself or you don't love your life, you can't love somebody else. And so we, in our own lives, for whatever reasons, and that we go into the book, but we're just not happy people.
And it doesn't matter how much you love your child. If you don't love yourself or each other,
recipe for disaster.
Very, very wise words. Very wise words, Nikki. And what was, I suppose, most shocking to me in the book was the practical elements of you trying to have a good divorce and how much you came up against I often talk about a very toxic divorce system, but you really did experience it, and I good on you for not giving up, and you must have had such a strong powerful vision to keep going through all of that, because and if you explain a little bit here now for those who haven't yet had a chance to read the book, even the counselors seem to be buying into this toxic notion of how people are supposed to get divorced.
Right. I think for me first, and is that when I left the house, I was completely blinded by resentment, all the other stuff we talked about, and I was going to show Nikki, and I was going to show the world what she had done wrong. And so I went out and did my research, and I hired one of the toughest divorce attorneys in Tampa, Florida. He asked for a $10,000 retainer, which I gave to him. He said, I'm just going to take a look at the paperwork and then come up with a plan, right? And this was when I got the plan, it was a 35-page, or maybe 40-page, I don't know, plan, like a game plan, business plan on how we were going to destroy Nikki. And I kept it for a while and I didn't read it. And then I was on a plane back from LA and I said, okay, let me get into this thing. And 2 pages into it, we talk about moments of clarity, or for the first time that I could see my actions. And if I went down this route, I knew where this route ended. I knew where this path ended because of my experience with my parents. So we get back to everything happens for a reason. But I wasn't able to see that all the way up because I was so blinded by the other stuff. But on that plane, at that moment, I realized what was going to happen, and I put it away, and I was done with it. I didn't read the other, 32 pages, and then I needed to find a different way. And so I called him on Monday, and I said, I'm not going to do this. I need to find another way. Can you send me back my retainer? And he sent me, he said, retainer? Oh, that's done. You owe me this amount of money because he spent so much time on this. Anyway, so through the process, I
probably
looked up,
copy and pasted it from somewhere.
Right. From past cases. But I then saw what this system, and I don't know if it was conscious, but I saw that what $10,000 got you.
It's a joke.
It's literally a joke. And he was, when we had these conversations, subtly, as I look back on it, subtly just, giving me these little, like, I don't know if, what the word is, but he was sort of feeding the fire.
Yeah.
And sort of being a counselor.
That's their job. I think that's how they get. That's right. Why they get paid so much.
He saw this divorce, I think, and he saw an annuity for the next however many years that was going to be a lot of money. And so then we found another way called this collaborative process, which was relatively new. It wasn't part of the statute. It's a little different today than it was back then. But basically what it is we both signed a contract that said we'd work together. We agreed to work together. And
I didn't in the beginning do all this mumbo jumbo stuff that this one did.
Right. She just had me followed and tracked, and she knew what I was doing.
I knew what he was doing, but that didn't mean I was doing it.
Right. She was just keeping a good eye on.
Back, and I talked. We talked to a few people, but I never went the steps that he took. I sort of just sat back and tried to wait the process out a little bit.
Right. And so we found our collaborative lawyers. We signed the contract. And then, as a business person, and I don't mean to sound apathetic towards this whole process because it was very tough, but I try to remove as much emotion as I could at that time, and look at it like every good business deal I've done is business people have made the business decision. And what my past experience with lawyers is sometimes they get in the way. Because it's in their best interest to get in the way. So Nikki and I, after we apologized to each other and we set that foundation, I asked her if she had any problem with joint custody, 50-50. She said absolutely not. And then we just tried to see if we could do it on our own.
I mean, I was never going to take my son's father from him.
Right. And after she said that,
not fair.
After she said that, I said, okay, well, all the other stuff can be worked out. Like at that point, that's all I was concerned with. So we just then decided just to see how we could do this. And not even with lawyers, not even with the collaborative process where you're sitting in the same room, but let's just see where we agree on where we agree. But let's just see where we agree. And we started off and it wasn't awkward because we also decided at that point to do what's best for Asher. Every decision we made had to be through the lens of what was best for Asher.
Like even if we wanted to kill each other in that minute, we had to sit back and think.
That wouldn't be best for Asher.
That wouldn't be best for Asher.
Well, one of the first collaborative lawyers I ever met, she gave me a poem which I recited in the TEDx I did recently, because it's an amazing poem for focusing parents' minds. And she said she'd give that poem to both to the parents of every session. Quite often have a photo of the child or children on the desk. So absolutely using that as a force to help, because I think it's the only way that you can work it out amicably is by having that clear.
I would love to read that.
Yeah.
I'll send it. Oh, it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, I'd love to read it.
So and what you said about the collaborative process, and I find that often you can sit and work it out yourself as you've done, but for many people, right, they don't have, sometimes they just don't have the emotional intelligence, or one of them is just in that blind fury state that you were in before, and it's just not going to happen at that point. But the intention is still there. And so with mediation and proper collaborative law, whether you've got collaborative lawyers who are not just trained in it, but really, really, really do have a different mindset. It's like they put a different head on. It's so different from traditional legal training. You've got to find the right people. And I think we were talking earlier, weren't we, about people having the right professionals. Just because someone has spent years and has a big, is a powerful lawyer or a therapist, you've got to really make astute decisions about, is this actually the right person for me? Are we on the right track? Because you're actually in a very vulnerable position as well. And I think you found that even with some of the therapists, you were saying they didn't seem to be in the same mindset as you of what outcome you wanted.
Yeah, and I think that the therapist, if I remember, we only had one meeting.
Oh, it's the worst.
With the therapist, who was it was in our divorce. If anything goes wrong, or we can't decide on anything, we would go see her, to be the mediator, to come to the decision. That we obviously haven't used her in 13 years. But the lawyer that I used, Nikki and I actually ended up hashing out the whole divorce. Now, the major business points of the divorce, right? Obviously, we need legal to put it together in legal words, because that's what they get paid so much to do, is write run-on sentences that make absolutely no sense except for the lawyers. But the major points of the custody, the payments, the division of assets, et cetera, were all worked out. And then we handed it to our lawyers and said, draw this up. Now, at the time, my lawyer turned to me and said, "Are you sure?" And to me, I don't know her motives. I'm not going to sit here and try to, question her motives. But she was saying, "Are you sure? Because if they're willing to do this, then maybe they're willing to do that." And I said, "Yes, I am sure." And it wasn't a small, we had companies together, houses together. It wasn't a small piece of, but I don't think it matters, right? It doesn't matter if it's, $100 million or $1,000, right? The financial insecurity and all that doesn't have to do with the amount of money. But she said to me, "Are you sure?" And I felt like at some point I just had to be the strong person and the committed person to this, because I think that a lot of it was stacked up against me. It was stacked up against us and what we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Now, maybe things have changed a little bit since.
No, I have to say, sadly not. I often say, although I encourage people to look at collaborative law, if mediation is usually less expensive and does the job nicely, but collaborative law is a fantastic option. Most people, certainly in the UK, have no idea it even exists, even though it's been around for years.
Right.
But also, I do always say the proviso is you really do need to make sure that just because they've been trained in collaborative law, that they are, that doesn't mean that they work collaboratively. And that is a massive issue in the industry, because it's a different training. They've learned to get what they can the most for one client, and then suddenly we're sitting around the table and their whole job is to cut a deal with the other lawyer, and it's like they've got different heads on it, really. So it is difficult,
right.
And you've got to really do your homework, haven't you? But good on you for not. A lot of people will be heavily influenced by that kind of experience.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's I can't imagine part of it them being just ground down from years of. I mean, I'm sure you deal with it all the time, and I bet it's hard to see it over and over and over again. I remember sitting with my friend, this is before Nikki and I got divorced, who was a divorce lawyer, and he had just got done with mediation, and they spent 3 hours arguing over an espresso machine. An espresso machine. And
happened.
And to me, I was like, well, how much do you get paid an hour? How much does the other lawyer get paid an hour? How much
you could go buy another one.
You could, and at the end of the day, we did the math. They could have bought 5 more espresso machines, but because it was important, she knew it was important to him, and he knew it was important. That he loved it. That's how crazy the whole system. So being a lawyer, being a counselor, being a mediator, whatever it is, I'm sure that they get sort of numb to these insane situations with insane people, and not insane in the clinical sense. Just
no, I couldn't agree more. Which is why effectively the work I do, I run these divorce financial workshops, they're called. But really, and sorry for anyone who's listening to this, I'm going to blow this open. What they really are dispute resolution boot camps. So, because before you go anywhere near the mediation or the collaborative law, you should be, if you've got finances, you need to work with a financial expert who's ideally someone who does long-term cash flow forecasting, which most people here and in America, they call them a financial planner. Most people don't really even know they exist, but they can give you a picture of how it's all going to work out over the years, so you can make a really informed decision about how you split the finances. And sometimes couples can work with a financial planner and not even need the mediator, because it's so obvious the best way to split it. And also the psychological side, so they're not arguing over the coffee machine, because they've maybe done an imago technique with a professional therapist or a coach, and they've learned to listen to each other, and because we don't learn these skills. So you don't have to invest very much time or money to get yourself in a position where if you do go into mediation or collaborative law, you're not going to completely mess it up. But people go in a terrible state, and of course it doesn't work. And then
Right.
and having seen that over the years, I just think, well, that's crazy. That you just need to get people ready first. It's like sending them out to run a race and they've done no training. And one of the things I love about your book is it gives people hope and an end goal, because I think what they do is they get stuck in the now and they don't look forwards, and they don't say, how are we going to be co-parenting, and will we be able to go to a party or a game and meet my ex with his or her new partner, and they can't imagine how that's ever going to be okay. But to read your book and see how you made it okay, that it wasn't easy, is, I think, a very powerful tool, and I shall certainly be recommending it to my clients to read. And just to finish, and
that's the the one thing that is so important that we talk about, or that we try to tell people, is it took time. I mean, this wasn't something that we sat at that coffee shop and we did these amends, we told each other we loved each other, and it was this kumbaya, and then it was all great and it was all simple. Now what we came up with in our plan was pretty easy. It's pretty simple, as far as, it's sort of like in recovery, you just don't drink, you go to meetings, and it seems pretty simple. But it doesn't mean it was easy. And there were some awkward moments. Nikki started dating somebody we knew, while we were married, and seeing him and the ego. When ego's hurt, there's probably no worse feeling in the world. But we were just kept on being committed to this, what's best for Asher, and our sort of mantra. And eventually it became normal, right? It was normal that we were in the same room. And I think if you had asked us after that coffee shop meeting what our goal would have been, what a win would have been, it would have been
just to be able to be in the same room together.
Right. Exactly what you said. Just be at a party and not everybody have to walk on eggshells, but more importantly, our son. Right. That he didn't have to walk on eggshells about, coming home excited about what he did with daddy, or coming home excited what he did with mommy. Right. That he could just be himself. He could just be a kid. And so that was our goal. Now we overshot that by a million miles,
but years later.
But years later, right? And it's 13 years later, and yes, could we have drawn this up and thought that this was going to be the outcome of that coffee shop meeting, or the steps we took? Absolutely not.
It's about intention, isn't it? The intention if you've got a clear intention. And for you, Nikki, what did you find, having made that clear intention right at the beginning? What were the biggest challenges for you?
The biggest challenge for me, I think, was when
me.
Well, as any woman would do, mom would do, I asked Ben. I realized that sometimes men deal with divorce differently than women do. So what I said to him was, listen, I know you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do. Keep that to yourself. I don't really want to know. But most of all, don't bring that around our child.
In other words,
keep the hoochies away.
and so,
and I said, that's the only thing I'm asking you. Don't have a revolving door of people around our son, which he probably in his mind at that point wanted to say, screw you to me, but he did not. And he said, I respect that. I respect the way you feel for our child, and I understand that's what's best for him.
And that is such a perfect example, because my first reaction at the time, where it didn't come sort of naturally, this relationship, was my first reaction was, who the hell are you to tell me who I can and can't bring around my, son? You're just, my ex-wife. But then when you take a lens of what was best for Asher and what was best for the relationship, she had a good point. If I'm honest with myself and I'm, being authentic with it, that was a reasonable request. And it was the best for Asher to not bring hoochies, as Nikki says, or having a revolving door of women in and out of his life, because he's already going to be stained by, his parents getting divorced and what relationships mean. And so I didn't want to further that, story in his head that it doesn't work, it doesn't, whatever. So it was a reasonable request.
It was. And so I think fast forward, he met his now wife, and I got a chance to meet her for the first time at one of Asher's soccer games.
Well, you talked to him before.
Well, I did.
Tell that story.
So, you're right. I should backtrack. Asher was at Ben's house one night, getting ready to go to bed. And oftentimes, almost probably every night that he wasn't with me, I would speak to him on the phone to say goodnight. So this one night, he was probably, 4.5? Four and a half. And he says to me, "Hey, Mommy, do you know Nadia?" And I said, "No, I've actually never met Nadia, but I know who Nadia is." And he's like, "Well, I know Nadia. You should know Nadia." And I said, "Well, I think I'm going to meet her sometime soon." And he said, "Here, Mommy, talk to her."
And he handed the phone to Nadia. He handed
the phone to Nadia, and here the two of us were. Awkward, very awkward, but it was like. But
it was him who said it was time.
His way of saying, "Hey, here's this girl. She's here. My mommy doesn't know her, but it's time. Like, she is obviously here, and my mom is there, but it's time for these two to know each other."
That was one of my favorite moments in the book. I absolutely love the book.
I will never forget Nadia's face. I don't know what your face was like, but Nadia's face went. I mean, she's a brown girl. But her face was pale white.
Mine was too. I mean, what do you say? Hi. I mean, what do you say? I look forward to meeting you. Of course. I mean, yeah. But that was Asher's way of saying, "Hey, you two.
It's time.
It's time."
And they have a great relationship, Nadia and Nikki. That if Nadia and I ever got divorced, it's not going to happen. But I would worry about who's going to get Nikki in that divorce. Anyway, but that's they go get their nails done.
Too complicated. You guys are all too together now.
Right. We're not getting it.
And I mean, even fast forwarding more so to about Nadia is, as a mom, one of the hardest things a mom has to do is be okay with some other woman putting their child to sleep. I mean, that was heart-wrenching. So for me, that was probably the hardest thing I ever had to deal with. No matter if I liked Nadia or not. That's like, okay, that's my baby. I only have so many years of getting to do this, but somebody else gets to do it half the time.
Yeah. And conversely, same with a dad. Yeah. And Asher and Chad would go fishing or do things, father-son things. And that is a arrow right to ego. But literally I had to say, you know what? I have no control over who Nikki's going to see. She's eventually going to be with somebody. All I can hope is that
they love this kid.
They love this kid as much as I do, and they treat Nikki and Asher well. And so when I look at it through that lens, Chad checks all those boxes, and I can't buy my own BS about him. Oh, and if I'm authentic, he is a great guy, and he's good for Asher, and he's good for Nikki. So
I was very lucky because my children's father, when he married, people were kind of worried about how I'd be, and I was just delighted. She was, and still is, a lovely, lovely girl, and she helped because he worked and didn't have much time with them. She provided stability so that I knew they were having a better experience when they went to his house than they would have had otherwise. So it was totally a blessing. But it's odd how people see it as strange, but because you do have to grow up and you do have to put your ego aside. But then but what I just wanted to round off with a little bit is because I think it's really important, is you were talking about that initial coffee, not just a coffee shop meeting, but the building of trust is. I always feel that you've lost one relationship's gone, that's gone completely. So you need to rebuild a new co-parenting relationship, and you have to rebuild that trust when there probably isn't. You may not think that that's even. It seems impossible at the time. It certainly seems impossible to me. And what has amazed me over the years is that by being nice to each other, by faking it till you can make it, as we were talking about earlier, that you can almost miraculously build this trusting relationship. And I feel that's totally something that's happened with you. And if you could pick out 1 or 2 points where you feel on that journey of building trust, so I'm throwing this at you a little bit, but can you think of any couple of things where you just thought, oh, and it's just that kind of cemented that co-parenting relationship in a way that that was really important to the quality relationship you have now?
Mine is simple, and it was Chad calling me one day, and again, this Nikki and I, this not necessarily about the building trust about Nikki and I, but it's about building trust of what we wanted to sort of accomplish, right? And so he called me one day, and he asked me if I would mind getting a cup of coffee with him. Ironically, we went to the same coffee shop that Nikki and I, cleaned up the wreckage, sat at the same table. And he asked me if it was okay for him to marry Nikki. So he basically asked for permission to marry Nikki. Now, if first, I tried to talk him out of it, and say, "Are you sure you want to do it?" And not because there was still something between Nick and I just wanted to warn him.
Oh.
But then, and at the end of the day, if I had said no, he still was going to do it. But it just showed me that not only was he all in on what we were doing, but he had enough respect for me as Asher's father to, ask for permission to be in his life in a more significant role.
Yeah.
So that, in turn gave me trust with him, but also that Nikki had made it clear, or I don't know, clear to him, but had made, that he saw through our actions how important it was that he,
what we were trying to build.
So that was the moment where, everything sort of switched for me, like, okay, wow, this is, again, beyond what we could have even imagined, but this is perfect.
Yeah.
No, and I think for me, one of the things that really helped me is I kept trying to bring myself back to the period of time where I was like, listen, no matter what happened, I loved this guy. Like, I loved him enough to have a child with him. So I kept trying to bring myself back, even when I was upset and I was like mad about things. I kept saying there was a reason for this. There was a reason we were meant to be here.
Right.
And I think one of the other things was when I called Ben one day when he and Nadia were having problems, and I was like, listen, stop being stupid. This is a good girl. You have a great girl. Don't mess this thing up.
Marry her.
Like, marry this girl.
Because we were fighting, she had moved out because I didn't want to get remarried.
You are an idiot.
Basically, that's exactly what she told me. And it was because of her, and because I trusted her as a friend, as a co-parent, that her advice to me, hearing from my ex-wife,
stop being an idiot.
Stop being an idiot. You need to marry this woman because you're not going to find anything better, and you're going to end up being alone. And what alone and miserable, and what kind of message is that going to send to ourselves?
Right.
So talk about trust. I then in turn hung up the phone and then had a serious conversation with Nadia about spending the rest of my life with her. So it was because of the guidance and trust and everything from this woman right here.
Fantastic. And just to finish, thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely talking to you. Very, very inspiring, and so wonderful to hear positive, powerful stories, because there's more out there, I know, but most people don't speak out like you do, right, because they don't want to be called weird. We know that it's weird not to do that. It doesn't make sense. You come together in love, you make a child or children. To throw all of that away out with the bath just because you're not legally tied to each other anymore is crazy. So because I got sent this, thank you so much, but where can people get Our Happy Divorce? Is it on
Anywhere
Amazon
books are
or-
sold online, Amazon,
Well,
Amazon sells it, Barnes and Noble,
ourhappydivorce.com.
ourhappydivorce.com. We are actually, because it's, again, not a career decision or choice for Nikki and I. We don't have another book in us, and this is it. So we're just trying to get it out to many people possible. If you go to mascot.com, that's our publisher, because, again, it takes two to make this thing work, and we talked about it earlier in the show. Both people have to be committed. So one book might not do it. So there's you can buy one, buy one get one free on our.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we couldn't get Amazon to do that.
No.
But mascot.com is our publisher, and there's a 2-for-1. So if you want to go through them and buy it.
Brilliant. I will add the links to when I share the video, because that's wonderful too. Yeah, you want both parents to receive it. Yeah.
Right, and then follow us everything on our Happy Divorce on social media, because part of this process is, like you said, instead
getting the word out.
Right, we don't want to be called weird,
it's okay,
although we are. But eventually, we would love to live in a world where we're called normal.
Right.
And we can change the conversation. I know what you're doing is phenomenal. Yeah. I know there's so many people out there in this community that are spreading this message. So hopefully people know going into, divorce isn't going away.
No, one couple at a time. Just want to help.
Right. And so, knowing going, into it, that if you got divorced, there's a different way.
Yeah.
And then those who are struggling, there's a different way. Because at the end of the day, we are convinced that if Nikki and I can do it,
anybody can.
Anybody can, because we are two hard-headed, type A, stuck in our ways, old mules.
Yes.
But somehow we managed to accomplish something extraordinary.
You have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and sharing your platform with us. We really appreciate it.
Very happy, and perhaps I'll have a catch up with you in a year or so and see how you're still getting on.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, just before you go, I just want to say I won't be a spoiler for the book, but there was one particular point where I literally cried. So it was just I'm sure you know that amazing moment that really took me by surprise, and it's a really surprisingly lovely book, actually. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much.